Welcome to Enlightened Evolution.
I'm Cay.
And I'm Christina.
We're here to discuss the ebb and flow of our soul's healing and transformation through self-reflection, choosing intentionally, honoring thyself, and following your inner guide.
Thank you for joining this safe space with us. Welcome to Enlightened Evolution. We are talking about spiritual awakening this week. Before we jump in, Cay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well today. The weather's beautiful, and I just feel overall great. Been working out. Feel like we haven't recorded in a while because we kind of been recording, so I just feel like excited to be here again today. And
Me too.
yeah, I don't know, I'm on this like you just go through phases in your life of sometimes you feel good, sometimes you don't feel good. And right now I feel really good and just staying consistent with myself, doing all the things that I need to. How about you? How do you feel?
Awesome. Yeah, I also have been getting more physically active, and it's making a tremendous difference in how I feel. I've also been practicing my meditation regularly, and that has been a true game changer. I'm sure we can do a future episode just on meditation, but it's significantly made me feel better.
Good.
Okay. So we are talking about a very I don't want it's complex and it's not complex. And it's different for everyone. And so I pulled some quotes to help kind of start us off. First, I want to kind of define what a spiritual awakening might be. And so, for a lot of people, it's a call to a higher consciousness or a deeper state of like mental awareness. Typically, it shifts your worldview, it transforms you on a personal level, it shifts your mindset. Um, uh, People call it different names: bliss, nirvana, enlightenment. But I think that those are all kind of at the end stage of spiritual awakening, those types of terms. But everyone's going to refer to it as something different and probably use different terms. So I think if what we're saying doesn't resonate with you, fill in the blank with your own terminology. We're using, what has been relevant to us. I will say that one of my biggest spiritual teachers in my awakening has been Ram Dass. And so I pulled some quotes from him. Um, One of them is, to him who has experienced to him who has had the experience, no explanation is necessary. To him who has not, none is possible. The other quote is, words exist because of meaning. Once you've gotten the meaning, you can forget the words. Where can I find a man that has forgotten the words so that I may have a word with him? You don't have to try. You don't even have to listen. We just have to be together and it will all happen. So these quotes, they may seem very like philosophical and far-fetched if you're not in the right mindset for them, but I pulled them because so much of spiritual awakening is in the unsaid, and we can sit here and try our best to articulate what we have experienced and what others experience, but until you really experience it yourself, you're not going to grasp the full meaning, I think. I'm going to let Kay jump into talking about the dark night of the soul and stages of spiritual awakening. But I do want to touch on one more quote from Ram Dass. I just love him so much. And he uses an analogy of the caterpillar to the butterfly as a spiritual awakening. And I think a lot of people are somewhat familiar with this. But it says, the caterpillar isn't walking around saying, man, I'll soon be a butterfly, because as long as he's busy being a caterpillar, he can never be a butterfly. It's only when the caterpillarness is done that one starts to be a butterfly. And that, again, is part of the paradox. You cannot rip away your caterpillarness. The whole trip occurs in an unfolding process under which you have no control.
I love
Okay,
that.
I'm done with my quotes.
It's okay. I think that there's different, like these levels and these stages, I think that they fluctuate. I don't think that just because you become to a higher level of one, it doesn't mean that you're not going to fall back into another and then re experience being at a higher level of self awareness or consciousness than you were previously. I feel like I've had several awakenings in my life, which the dark night, we'll call it, has been like this painful period that was a catalyst for the spiritual awakening. It always happened during a time when just any type of really, we can get into that a little bit later, the experiences that we have that are just super painful. The universe, I just feel like, was sending these experiences to me to shift my reality so I could gain more clarity on how to just live more peaceful and be kinder to myself and others. I feel like as I've awakened a little bit more, I know when I'm having like this dark night, and I feel like I move from through them a lot quicker. I pray about it during it and just about the desired outcome I would like, or to help me through it and just most importantly bring me peace. To me, it feels like a depressive episode, and it's like a part of my ego is dying so I can develop just a higher state of awareness and my spirit can just be reborn again. I think that during these times, I would feel an overall sense of hopelessness and just being unhappy for no real reason. I still was going to the same places, had the same people in my life, and I would no longer find joy in these places or spending time with these people or felt like I belonged there anymore. I'd feel just kind of lost and no longer motivated to do the same things every day that I had been doing for months or days or years. And there had been times when I started questioning my purpose. I think that the physical symptoms I would start to have would be overly anxious when I was, if I like, let's just say, as an example, made plans to do something with somebody that I'd always done, but all of a sudden I'd feel anxious about it. I would dread going and I would no longer have just the desire to do these things anymore. I'd be easily irritated. I'd have sleep disturbances. I'd start to have really vivid dreams and just feel overly tired all the time. And I'd always feel like in my stomach or, heart palpitations. I realized that my habits, like with food especially, and my inconsistency with working out, I would like crave different foods. The foods I was eating would just make me just they just weren't desirable anymore. I didn't enjoy them as much anymore. I don't know, what do you think? What do you experience during the dark night, during yours?
So I'm trying to I think I experienced one very long dark night of the soul. And maybe I can get into it now and then we can go into stages, but I feel like mine lasted for a good year and a half. And since then, like I've experienced, small bouts of depression, but I don't think I've really truly experienced what I would consider another dark night of the soul. For me, it was like accumulation of all these things adding up. It was I was at a place, take you back to 2018. This is when it started for me. Um, I was in like the best place in my career. I was making the most money I had ever made. I was like the only person in my family to ever get a graduate degree. And I my director had just named me her succession planning. I was like one of the youngest people in leadership. So I felt like I was really doing something with my life. At the same time, my marriage was falling apart, which ultimately led to a divorce. Through that divorce, even though it was something I wanted, I became extremely anxious, had to get on antidepressants, lost 20 pounds. And I think I had so much fear of like judgment getting divorced and feeling like a failure. And I was feeling like such a success in everything else in my life. So to feel like a failure in that, like it felt like I took a big hit with that.
Mhm.
I My dad started getting sicker and sicker during this time as well. My mom was constantly reaching out to me. So I'm in Georgia at this time. My mom's in Michigan. My mom and dad are in Michigan. My dad had had a hemorrhagic stroke, had disabilities from that, and she was having a harder and harder time taking care of him and also I don't want to say controlling him, but like he was blind on the left side, so he was not allowed to drive. Also, because he had had seizures and he was like stealing the car keys and going and driving and crashing the car.
Oh my goodness.
So it was like hard for my mom to do all these things. And so after my divorce, I was like, my dad also decided at that time that he was no longer going to take any of his medications, which he had severe heart disease. So as a medical professional, I knew he was not going to live much longer.
Mhm.
So I made the hard decision to leave this career that I had worked so freaking hard for and go back to Michigan to be with my dad because ultimately that meant more to me than anything. But there was a huge depression of leaving that career, everything I had worked for. I had built this happy place in Georgia and I'm going back to the place that I hate. I'm sorry, Michigan,
No,
but
that's
there's
okay,
so
girl.
much there's so much trauma that's happened to me in
Yeah.
Michigan. It's like as soon as I enter that state, I just am depressed. And so I moved back to Michigan, got depressed almost immediately. I moved in with my parents so I could help take care of my dad. I ended up starting to date the first husband that I had. He was also going through a divorce, the one that was abusive. Yep. He came to me and was like, you know, I'm so sorry for everything I did to you. I've gone to counseling. And this was like the apology I had never gotten and had always wanted. And I was like, this is a changed man. This is amazing. Maybe we can rekindle this love that we once had. And that was very short lived.
Mhm.
He ended up cheating on me with the person he was divorcing. So that ended quickly.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm back in Michigan. I'm jobless at this point because I was like, not because I couldn't get a job, but I was like, I made a good money from selling my house. So I had some cushion to just stay and be with my dad for a little bit. But that was also hard for me because I'm a person who likes to work. So I was laying in bed every night, severely depressed, not wanting to be alive anymore. I did end up going back to work at the bedside, and I remember, like, having a plan of how I was going to end my life, and that would, like, soothe me to go to sleep at night, and that's how I would fall asleep, and then somehow the next day I wouldn't carry through with it. Something, would really my cat
Aw.
got me through that time and feeling like I had to stay here to take care of her and my dog, but she was laying next to me every night, like, giving me hope for the next day. So in Michigan, get cheated on, end that relationship. Then I decided to jump into another relationship with someone who had been a friend since I was a teenager, but had gone on to have a child with one of my friends. And I thought that that would be a good idea to date him. So I totally ruined that friendship.
Yeah.
And dating him was not a good idea. It didn't work out. It was very short lived just because, like, we're great friends, but dating, no. Then I met you and I started hanging out more during this time. And I really attribute you to a lot of my awakening because not only was I seeing you brought a different presence than most of the people that we hung out with, and you introduced me to our psychic. And when I went to her, I mean, just everything she said was spot on in her reading, and I hope we can get her on the show someday. And one of the biggest things she did for me was told me to start meditating. She gave me some resources for that. So I did start to meditate a little bit. So it was kind of planting the seed for this awakening. But also during that time, my dad ended up passing and wrecked wrecked me,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
Horrible. Wrecked me, wrecked my family. Literally like the week before he passed though, I jumped into another relationship. So I'm jumping from relationship to relationship, trying to feel an ounce of love, getting myself into situations that I never should have got myself into. No self love at this point. Really just like rambling, trying to find an ounce of serotonin and I found this other quote that says people will do anything no matter how absurd in order to avoid facing their own souls. One
Mhm.
does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So, in this period of my life, I was diving deep into the darkness. I was not self aware at all, not conscious of my actions and their outcomes. So I start dating this guy right before my dad passes, and then he's there for me through my dad's passing. And I think we kind of build this trauma bond, and things, escalate very quickly. He lives in Chicago. I live in Michigan. I'm driving to be with him every weekend. Then I'm starting to interview for positions in Chicago. And then we get an apartment together in Chicago in this sky rise on Michigan Avenue overlooking Lake Michigan. Way too expensive, should have never gotten it. But I was so blinded by wanting, being in love with this person and wanting to do everything that they wanted. And so I move in with him. And about a month after we move in together, he breaks up with me. And this is the point where I'm like, oh, I mean, I'm at my lowest low. And I'm like, I just got this apartment in Chicago. I'm still working in Michigan. So I'm working 4 days a week in Michigan, driving to Chicago from my apartment on the weekend, sleeping on my friend's couch because my mom also disowned me at this time because I was dating a Muslim. So all of these things going
Yeah.
together. And then I make the decision, fuck all this. I'm going back to Georgia. And that's where my spiritual awakening happened. So I'm going to stop my story there. So we can talk more about the stages of awakening. But I think it's important to highlight how deep. I mean, some people's dark night of the soul, they might become incarcerated, might get into addiction, and it doesn't always have to be that heavy of a situation.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned, it can just be these depressive episodes as well. For me, I think it had to be this accumulation of so many fucking things at one time for me to really like wake up and be like, "Hey, you have to start taking control of your life."
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's heavy, and it's a lot, and I feel like so many people go through so much shit, and the more like, what if you would have never woken up, though? Do you feel like some people are chosen to woke up, or do you feel like it's a choice to wake up?
I don't think I don't think it's any kind of like divine like, "Oh, you're going to wake up, you're going to wake up." I think we all have the ability,
Mhm.
and I think it would have happened eventually. And I say that to and still believe, like, some people, it doesn't happen for at all in their lifetime, and
Right. We
That's
know
fine.
that.
Yeah. I just think it was I'm thankful for it. I don't know. I think it was time for it to happen in my life.
Mhm. I think that my awakening, especially this last one, has led me to just I've always had the intuition, I've just never followed it, and now I'm much quicker to, "Oh, this is that, so I'm gonna proceed this way because it's for the betterment of my life and my well-being." I do have some events in your life that may trigger your spiritual awakening. Loss of a pet or a loved one that happened with you,
Mhm.
ending a long-term relationship, ending long-term friendships or letting go of toxic family members, ending a job you're miserable at and seeking a career change, feeling like you're being called to do something else, becoming a parent or realizing that you're never going to become a parent or losing a child,
Mm.
your young adult children moving out of your house, changing geographic locations, like how you said you had to move from Michigan to Georgia to or Chicago to Georgia to basically save yourself,
Everywhere.
choosing sobriety over addiction and going from being non-spiritual, atheist, agnostic, and then just having this overall sense of, um, I don't know, being flooded with God and love. And so I don't know, mine happened. I would say I was so unconscious, had horrible dating experiences in my childhood, and then I had my son very young at 20 years old in a very abusive relationship, and I was just wild in my 20s, didn't really have a stable job, ended up getting with my daughter's dad, and it was a completely different dynamic than different I would say cultural experience than my son's dad. So I thought it was great compared to what I was, used to dealing with, but there were still a lot of things that were hurtful in that relationship, and a lot of things that I did that I'm not proud of that were also hurtful to him, a lot of substance abuse. So that relationship ended. I was about 24 years old, and by this point, it's like, okay, I have 2 children, I wanna be married, I wanna settle down, I want a family, so. And I also didn't have any self-love, and I'm, like, desperate to find that. I feel like I'm running out of time. So, I get with this man, and he was an illegal immigrant and completely in love with each other. We barely even he spoke Spanish, I spoke English. We could barely even understand each other, but just that connection was there. Of course, a lot of physical lust was there. But he was good to us. He provided for us and sincerely loved my children, and he ended up getting deported, so that was like, "Oh my goodness." That was nothing that wasn't like any other relationship that I've ever experienced ending because he was just ripped away from me so suddenly.
Yeah.
Although his behavior did become dangerous, and so looking back, of course, it was for the better during that time. After that, I dated and didn't work out, got into another abusive relationship with someone that was in the military. That was pretty traumatic, a lot of physical abuse. That didn't end up working out. So by this point, I had my son at 20. Now I'm 27 years old. And it's like, what the fuck am I doing? I already had bought my house. So at least I was established and had, stability for my children, but I wasn't making nearly as much money as I wanted to. I decided to go to nursing school, become a nurse by 30. And I would say that's when I woke up was when I was around 27 years old. I had went to right when I first started nursing school, I went to Arizona to be with my grandmother. She was dying of cancer, and I spent a week with her. We had a lot of good heart to hearts, and she was just my person. Anytime I was ever going through anything, she never told me what to do, but she always asked me the right questions to figure it out for myself. And it's really hard not having that anymore, especially
Mm,
during that time in my life where it's like I felt like I hit rock bottom and didn't know what direction I was going in. So after I left Arizona and came back home, she passed away 4 days later. And so it's still hard without her. I still think about her, for sure, of course. And but I feel like all of those things just were a catalyst to push me to like, you need to be self sufficient for yourself. You need to do something for yourself that gives you a good financial foundation and stability for you and your kids, because you're obviously not making good choices with the partners that you choose to provide that for you. Looking back at my parents, my dad did that with my mother, almost married 40 years. So I just thought that men, thought that way, and that's not how it was. So
yeah.
I feel like since I become a nurse and went to school, when I get into these relationships now, I can quickly move through them and then see, okay, this isn't for me. People I come across, friendships, anything like that, I can quickly, exit and go the other way. I Cassie was I would say a big part of it too. I can't remember if I went to see her. I think I saw her before you came up there, so she had already been in my life during that time. I was going through all
Mhm.
that, so she opened my world into like this spiritual realm much larger than Christianity, because I was raised Catholic, so that's all I kind of knew. And so I really appreciated that. I could dive into my spirit in a much deeper way. And that's when I really grasped what intuition was and how to follow it. That is still an everyday practice for me. So after I, became a nurse, I'm like, okay, in my 30s now, I still want to get married. I still want to settle down, but I need to start choosing different partners to do that with. And so I meet this doctor at work, and we hit it off, and that also ended terribly. So now, but I'm proud of myself because in these past relationships, I stayed so much longer. But in this one, I feel like I shouldn't have stayed the year and a half that I did. And although he was good in a lot of ways, it was also, he taught me a lot of things about myself, in the sense of like I needed him to shame me and judge me and make me feel guilty in order to take a deeper look at myself and what I experienced, so I could, not so I could relive the trauma, but so I could bring it to the surface and process it. So I think I'm still
Right,
doing.
because there was a unhealed part of you that was
Mhm.
willing to put up with that behavior.
Yeah. So as much as what he did hurt me, I appreciated it. I still appreciate it. And that's been almost, 5, 6 months now that I haven't been in that relationship. So I just feel like I'm thriving now. I'm eating great, working out, taking care of my kids. My relationship with my children is excelling, and we're getting closer and laughing a lot more and not as many arguments. And I'm slowly starting to date again. But let me tell you, honey, these little tiny like red flags that pop up in dating, it's like, okay, I don't need to give them the benefit of the doubt anymore, or feel sorry for them and hope that they can reach a new place. I feel like I can quickly navigate which direction I need to go in now with who I come across and where I'm going. Let's see here. You want to get into
Do
the
we wanna get
stages?
into some stages? Yeah.
Yeah, you can go ahead and start with this. I don't know if our stages should probably align. I know you sent me a resource earlier. If you wanna
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think if you just, look up videos on spiritual awakening, each one is gonna be different.
Mhm.
And the video I found this morning, and I'll post it in our resources, I liked it because she does speak to the fact that you may go through all of these stages, you may go through none of them, you may go at different times and different, like, it doesn't have to be linear, and it's not linear. So I liked her approach to it, but in general, what I have is typically prior to an awakening, you are trapped in a repeating pattern, you are unconscious to that pattern, and you're operating
Absolutely.
from ego.
Mhm.
You're in the caterpillar stage. Then a lot of people experience a dark night of the soul. I put that as the cocoon stage. So, like, think of the caterpillar when they are making a cocoon. They probably think, like, this is the end of my life. Like, everything's like, this is it. This is all of it.
Mhm. It's dark and it's
Not knowing
tight and
what's
it's
going to
uncomfortable.
come.
Mhm.
Yeah, not knowing what's gonna come on the other side of it. And then you experience, like we've said, this ego death. You have this perspective shift, this kind of deconstruction of everything you previously knew. There becomes an internal space between your ego self and your observer self. I like the term observer self more than I like the term higher self. And I just heard this for the first time today.
Ooh, I like
I
that.
don't like anytime we use terminology that is like higher, good and evil, higher,
Mhm.
lesser, because it implies judgment. And I don't think that there's any judgment in this space. So you're observer self. And you start to understand that life isn't happening to you, it's happening from you. And you have the ability to control your life and to manifest what you want to manifest. I think, especially myself, like when I was operating in that ego self, very unconscious, I very much felt like life was happening to me. Like, what are these people doing? Yes, had people done me wrong? Yes, but I also continuously got myself in stupid situations. So there was some accountability to be had
So,
for sure.
my life how it is right now is 100% on me. 100%.
And it's kind of a breath of fresh air to know,
Yeah,
like,
it
I
is.
think a lot of people don't wanna take accountability. They wanna feel like life's happening to them because then they have something else to blame. And this even I'm gonna do my best to not speak badly about Christianity because I do respect the religion, and I think there's a lot of good in it. But that's one of the things that I've noticed in Christianity, being raised in it, was that, "Oh, we just give it to God. Just everything, just give it to God. He's gonna take care of it, and we have no control over it."
Well, you're right.
Actually, you are God, first of all. That's that's the first thing I learned in my awakening is you are God. God is not a sky daddy sitting on a throne. We all are God connected, and that's just my personal belief. So it might not, everyone that experiences spiritual awakening is not going to have the same beliefs, but that is what I came to know. So ego death, and then you start to explore and research, and you're really interested in self-development and growing, and how do I be a better person? How do I not operate from ego and operate from a place of love? And how can I choose love every day? You start to reach out to community and looking for others that are have the same mindset as you. And this is something I think next episode we're going to get into ending friendships. Usually when you go through a spiritual awakening, you you outgrow a lot of people in your life.
And it's
And I hate that term
painful.
outgrow too
No,
because
it's
but
so
it is
true.
you don't align.
You don't okay, that's better. You don't align anymore.
Yeah.
And because right, there's no need to judge them because for so long you were in alignment with them and you did the same
Yeah.
exact things, and it's just that you wanna just take a different path and be on a different journey now, and it doesn't have to be there doesn't have to be animosity or anything. Not from you, there doesn't, but a lot of times when you choose a different path, you have a lot of animosity from your family and your friends that you once did all those things with, and you get a lot of ridicule, like, you think you're better, or they start to talk bad about you,
Oh,
and
yeah.
reveal the things that you used to do. "Well, you think you're so much better now. You used to do this, this, and this." It's like, "Yeah, I did, and I'm not gonna
I
choose to
did.
do this anymore, and it's okay that I did
Right.
it."
Yep. And I'm not judging you for continuing to live that lifestyle, it just doesn't align, and you start to spend less and less time with these people, especially if they're committed to holding you in a box of who you used to be. There's gonna be people that are open to your new outlook in an even if they don't embrace it, they might, welcome it and say, "Okay, like, it's a positive change," but I think it also makes people reflect on themselves, and that's where the negativity comes from. Because then they're like,
Mhm.
"Well, do I need to change?" Or I
It
don't
may
know.
Yeah, I think it
So I
makes
did
people
find
uncomfortable. It makes them uncomfortable when
Mhm.
you stop doing certain things. A lot of I experienced a lot in a friendship I let go of. They would kinda try to like, peer pressure me to continue the same behavior, and it's just and, you just kind of become detached and, like, the connection fades, but it's still painful. It's just as painful, if not more, losing a friendship than it is, like, a romantic relationship.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because a lot of times you've had those friendships longer than any romantic
Yeah. Like, I
relationship.
miss these friends. I went to school with them since, gosh, kids. I miss them. I think about them every day. I hope they're doing well.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the hard part too when you're leaving it from a place of love and understanding of I wish the best for you, but we just can't we're no longer aligned.
Yeah.
And it's hard cuz usually like you said they take it very negatively. So we start to connect to community. We want to get to know people that are also going through awakenings and also have, insight to this new thought process that we have. We also encounter old patterns conflicting with new information. This is something I've experienced, especially in work. So, and I love Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now, because he was a Harvard professor, psychologist, like tenured, this elite professional, right? And he had his spiritual awakening and he's like, this is all bullshit. All these letters after my
Mhm.
name and my email signature. I've got 18 letters after my name and my email signature. They're all just made up things. Like
Yeah.
it's not really something that matters. And so it's hard to operate in those systems that you previously were very ingrained in. For me, that also meant losing my religion. I no longer practice Christianity after my spiritual awakening because it didn't align with this new information that I had.
Mhm.
Uh, we start to do shadow work because we start to learn that the only way out is in. So we got to go inward and work with our shadow and understand the root of our behaviors, do that inner child work that we've talked about, and we start to become super self aware. We start to share wisdom that we've learned, but not in a colonizer type of way. So I made a note here that I noticed a big difference. So, like I said, I grew up in the church. I went on missions trips. I was very much like, it's so crazy to like look back. Back then, I was like, oh, we're doing this for Jesus and we're going to go out and tell everyone about Jesus and we're winning souls. And I remember they would tell us in church, like, you're going to have so many jewels in your crown when you get to heaven because of all the souls that you saved.
Mhm.
And I remember, just thinking, like, well, everyone has to know. I don't want anyone to go to hell. And then I had this huge perspective shift. And now, the knowing that I have, I don't feel like I need to go out and shove it down people's throats. It's more of if someone wants to have a conversation with me about it, let's have that conversation. Let's have this podcast. If people want to listen, they can listen.
Yeah, if you don't like it, it's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, then listen to something else.
I
But it's interesting because what I've experienced in Christianity, it almost felt like they were trying to convince themselves of their beliefs by shoving it on other people. And I say specifically like with my mom, like I remember one day when I told her like, "Hey, I no longer practice Christianity." She was bawling and she's like, "Oh my god, I don't want you to go to hell." And I was like, "I don't believe in hell." And it was just like she was so upset because she really thought I was going to hell, and she couldn't grasp the thought that, like, I don't actually believe that there is a hell. I
yeah.
love that for you, but for me, there's not a hell.
Yeah, I have somebody in my family that's very much into an organized cult-like religion, and they have told me many times that only a certain amount of people are going to heaven, and I want you to come with me, and it scares me you're not going to. I think that people that feel like they they feel like they're higher than you in a way. They feel like their practices and their belief systems are better. So they give you unwarranted advice on what they think you should and shouldn't be doing. I think that's rude. I would never come up to
Yeah,
somebody and say, "You know, don't you see like what you're doing right now is hindering your ability to grow and you should probably stop doing these things because it would make you a better person." Like I would never go up and say that to somebody, but I've had not I mean, and if they wanted advice, I would give it to them.
yeah,
But I would just to take it upon yourself to insert your belief system into somebody else's life, and they need to experience these things on their own.
absolutely. And I think that's really the difference is I stepped into this calm an absence of fear really, and I realized how much Christianity was fear-based. And, you know,
100%.
maybe someone else experiences it differently, and that's great for them. But I remember those shirts. Remember they would say "Fear God"?
Mhm.
Do you remember those, like, in the early
Mhm.
2000s?
Yeah.
And that was what Christianity. I had to fear this overarching male figure that was judging my every move. And as we get into the awakening, like, I just had this complete release of all fear, no fear of death. There was always that, like, okay, did I not pray correctly in order to go to heaven? Maybe I am going to go to hell when I die. Like, I know I've done some bad things, but I also prayed to Jesus, so maybe I'm not going to go to hell. There was always that fear. And
Think
when I experienced my awakening, now I will say my awakening was a chemical awakening. Not all people come to it in that way. It's a very abrupt way to awaken, and I think the downside of that is you haven't put in all the work. So you have this, like, instant realization, very similar for, like, people that do ayahuasca. You have this I think the biggest way people describe it is you see God. And when I say you see God, I'm not saying, again, that you see some man sitting on a throne. You see that everything is God and that you are, and that it's this connectedness, it's this lack of judgment, it's this lack of fear, and just pure love. But then when you come down from that, integrating it into your life, it's a process. It's not like we've said, it's not linear. You're not just gonna magically be a perfect person afterwards.
no. I I grew up Catholic, so any bad things we did, we could just go tell the priest all of our sins and we were forgiven. So it's like we could do whatever we wanted and just keep confessing them and everything was gonna be okay.
Right.
I remember being a kid going poop, thinking like, "Is God looking at me right now? Like, I want my privacy."
Oh my
For
gosh.
real.
I remember alway God is watching you.
Yeah, oh, yes. Just wild.
Is there anything else you wanna add to the stages?
I don't think so. I think that was amazing.
So, I did want to kind of share as well, like, what I experienced in my awakening. So, I shared the dark night of the soul, and I know I just trauma dumped on y'all. So, thanks for I forgot to tell you to buckle your seatbelts, and there's so many more details within that story that make it even more ridiculous, but I just hit the highlights.
Mhm.
So, I made it back to Georgia. At this point, I had to pay the apartment in Chicago $10,000 to leave.
Holy shit.
Ran that up on my credit card. Yeah, because I broke the lease
Mhm.
10 months early. So they actually, I was supposed to have to pay them the remainder of the lease, which at $3,000 a month was not going to be pretty. But because of COVID, this was 2020. I ended up moving back to Georgia in May of 2020. So COVID was hot and popping at this time. Yeah, and not to mention COVID itself was a dark night of the soul for many people. We were
For the
forced to
world.
stay inside. Yeah, for the world, really. And I think so many people experienced spiritual awakenings during that time. Just
We got to
and
slow
I think
down. It slowed us down,
yes.
and
Yes.
we got to kinda reflect and just sit with ourselves a lot more, which wasn't good for a lot of people. I'm sorry with anyone out there that COVID just completely annihilated with depression and loneliness with, but I was kinda not thankful for it, but I was thankful to be at home and not have to go out in the world every single day, just busy, 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 rushing, 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 and you can't even take a second to, like, sit back and observe.
Yes. And that's really where your awakening comes from is being in the present moment and shutting off the external factors and really grasping reality, which is more than, the jobs that we work and all these societal constructs that we have. And especially us in the medical field. I know it drove so many people out of working in the medical field. I remember I was an assistant nurse manager when COVID started, and every day I would have to go tell my staff a new way that they had to don PPE and, "Oh, we don't actually have enough PPE for you, so you gotta reuse this mask, even though we've told you for years you can't reuse your mask." All of these things that contradicted everything we had ever told you, and tomorrow it's gonna change again, and the next day it's gonna change again. And they're so frustrated and feel like they're unsafe and they're not protecting themselves, and how can they safely deliver care? And I'm so frustrated. We were all frustrated, and we were all trying to figure it out together. But it was very traumatic for medical professionals,
Yeah.
especially with, like, how serious it was portrayed in the news, and us medical professionals. I mean, I was seeing people die every single day of it. So, I know a lot of people have certain political beliefs about COVID, and that's all well and good, but when you were seeing people die every single day of it, and you're scared to take it home to your family, and then you're scared that your loved ones might get sick, like, there was just so much fear and anxiety around that. But away from
Yeah.
COVID. We are 4 years out. So I go back to Georgia. I'm day 2 back into my apartment. I get this apartment that's right by where I go back to my previous place of employment. They welcome me back with open arms. It's not the same position I was in before. I'm actually reporting to one of my colleagues that who used to be on the same level as me. Now I'm reporting to her. But I'm in education, which is what my degree is in and what my passion is in. So I'm happy in that. So I'm unpacking my apartment. I'm all disheveled and sweaty and nasty. Don't have any groceries yet. So I go to Texas Roadhouse down the street, sit at the bar to have a yummy margarita. They have great margaritas at Texas Roadhouse. And this kid's at the bar and he just comes over and sits next to me and starts up a conversation. And at this point, I'm what, like how many breakups in a year? Too many breakups in a year. I can't even count how many breakups in the past year. And I'm like, I am not dating anybody. But he comes over and talks to me, and I'm like, okay, he's a cool guy. Like, he wasn't being like too forward. He was just being like very conversational. And we get talking about hiking and things. And he's like, hey, if you ever want to go hike sometime, we can. So I got this new hiking partner just from sitting at the bar at Texas Roadhouse. We go on some hikes. I tell him, hey, I'm not interested in anything romantic, but we can be friends. And he's like, okay, that's cool. He was a really nice guy. And he starts to tell me about his experience with psychedelics. And at this point in my life, I had been, I don't know, I'd only ever had alcohol and marijuana. That's it. Didn't venture out into anything else at this point in my life. And I was like, you know what? After everything I've been through, let me find out. I was like, what do I have to lose at this point? And so he proposes that we're going to take this psychedelic trip together, and he's going to guide me through it because it is very important to have someone that can be your guide during it. It's very important to make sure the set and the setting are correct. So me leading up to this, I know we're going to do this, and I'm like researching all the things, like, because he was like, well, you don't want to have a bad trip. And I was like, okay, well, so then I'm like looking up bad trips and things. He's like, you got to be in the right mindset. And I'm like, I'm going to take what comes at me, but I did have some preparation of some, like, I had certain shows that we watched, during one of which is Midnight Gospel, and I highly recommend it. It's on Netflix. I will also put that in the show notes. So during this trip, I just felt an overwhelming oneness with everything, just immense love. Like I said, complete absence of fear. In this, leading up to this, I was still so very hurt and upset with the guy that had just broken up with me. I felt devastated. But during this trip, I felt complete forgiveness for him. I felt forgiveness for myself, for the things that I had gotten myself into. I started to have this realization of all of my patterns that had led to this moment and how I had got to where I was. And I slowly started to like lose my religion, I guess. I started to have this realization, like, there is no heaven or hell, there's just love. I still don't have a firm belief of what happens when we die. And part of that awakening is kind of the release of needing to know those things. So
It's like the
I
greatest
used to
secret
like
ever kept. It's the greatest secret
the
ever
greatest
kept.
secret
Yeah,
ever
nope,
kept.
nobody
Yeah.
knows. Yeah, God gatekeeps that for sure.
And I I don't know. Like I felt I for the most majority of my life, I felt a deep like I need to be sure of things, and I need to know things, and I need to be rooted in, my beliefs. And I think a lot of that did have to do with Christianity, but during this awakening, I just felt like a complete release of needing to control the outcome, I guess. And so I was fine with not having the answer to everything, and I'm still fine with that. So I experienced this chemical awakening, but then there's the integration back into reality. So you have this profound 12-hour experience. And then how do I make sense of this? And during that, like, I'm trying to iterate to the person I'm with, like, what I'm experiencing, and he's not even grasping it. Like I said in the quotes at the beginning of this, it's something you really can't put into words. And
Yeah.
so I'm doing my best. Hopefully it resonates with those it's supposed to resonate with. But I will say, like, after that, I definitely was like digging deep and like, okay, I want to meditate more. I want to keep this going. I want to keep this momentum going. I was reading so many books from different spiritual leaders like Ram Dass, Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, all kinds of people. And then it was also this like very much before in my career, I was very concerned with climbing the corporate ladder and like being prestigious and having certain titles and these types of things. And after I was like, this is all bullshit. Like, none of that actually matters. A title doesn't impress me. Kindness now impresses me. And how kind are you? How much empathy do you display? And I also realized during this time that really my career itself was a trauma response. I went into nursing because my mom told me that I had to. Not to say that I didn't fall in love with it. I definitely did. And I loved taking care of people. But I think the constant like climbing the corporate ladder and, continuing to get degrees and get certifications and all these things was a need to like prove my worth to someone else.
Yeah.
And so afterwards I'm like, okay, well here I am, $100,000 in student loans. And I kind of don't want to do this anymore. And that has been something that I'm still working through because I am still in that role. And like how to, I go to work and people think that things are so much more serious than they are. And they get so reactive, and it's like, how do you integrate into that you no longer buy into, I guess? And so that's something I'm still navigating. I remember at one point thinking like I wanted to live off the grid and just go live in a commune somewhere.
You know,
But
yes.
I don't think that I would be happy with that either. But you do like you feel this need to like get away from everything you did before. I felt like there was like this final knowledge of like everything is made up. Language is made up, gender roles made up, money made up. Oh, this little coin equals 1 cent. We just all collectively agree that it equals that,
Yeah.
but it doesn't actually have that value. Time, calendars made up, social rules, dress codes, religions, social classes, fashion. I remember, being so concerned about having a designer bag and designer things. And, I was always posting on social media if I got something new. And now you see me in a baggy t shirt. Like,
I agree with
I
that.
don't
It's like,
care.
I don't care about anything anymore, but I don't say that in a negative way to where like the things I care about more and I value more, like my family, my health, how I'm treated, the effect I have on others. I've changed my perspective to being able to like I don't need my perspective to be shared as much anymore. I want my perspective to be understood, but I'm also able to perceive others and how their life experience has affected them. I want to be able to have a deeper understanding for other people and just having that overall sense of connectedness with everything alive on the earth. It's almost like words to value the the way that you feel after you just kind of wake up. Mm.
Definitely.
It makes me kind of, does it make you like, it makes me sad for my younger self that I didn't recognize it soon enough or didn't have the a teacher with the wisdom. I didn't cross their path quickly enough. I mean, of course, everything happens the way it's supposed to, and I can let go of that. But I feel like I would have just been so much more at peace a lot sooner in my life if I would have
Oh, yeah.
had those
Definitely. I do
realizations
think of
then.
that.
Like, why did it take me so long
And
to wake up?
we're young.
I know. I know, but I feel like because of so much shit that I've been through, like, I feel like my spirit's young,
Oh,
but I feel like my soul is
right.
so old,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
And yeah, I feel like I've lived 1,000 lives at this
Yeah.
point.
Yes.
And I was talking with my brother about this, and I was telling him, like, us even going into this podcast, even since my awakening in 2020, like, my perspective has continued to shift. It's really like the unfolding of a lotus flower or even the peeling of an onion. There's so many layers, and you just keep pulling back more and more. And in the beginning, there was this like ego thought of, "Ooh, now I'm working towards enlightenment and I'm gonna, have all the answers." And then I was like, no, that's the ego speaking. And we've got so much more to learn.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so going into this podcast, I was like, we might share information and speak on things that, down the road in season 2, 3, 4, 5 that we no longer agree with or align with. And my brother was like, well, yeah. And then just bring it up then and talk about how your perspective has shifted. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's that saying? When you're presented with new information, your perspective can change, which has just
Oh, yeah.
happened multiple times within my life. I like that. I think there's so many things I love about how I've evolved, but I think the biggest thing is just not being as triggered as I used to be by the things that used to trigger me and noticing it. Like, especially at work, there's a couple people I work with, and it's like, oh, like that person said something passive aggressive or snarky, and it's like, you kind of just smile on the inside, like that didn't even bother me. I hope you have a better day, you know?
Oh, yeah. You start to learn more that people's attitude towards you has more to do with what's going on internally in them
Oh, yeah.
rather than you.
Oh, yeah.
But there are still things that it still triggers me. And I think
Oh,
did I
girl, yeah,
send
I
you
don't
the
want anybody out here to think that I don't get triggered and pop off over here, like, because I certainly still do. I'm still a mom, I still gotta set boundaries with people, still have a menstrual cycle, I'm still get tired, I still got something to say, but I
Right.
but I'm quicker to forgive though, like, I love that too. I don't have all this hate and animosity and resentment in my heart really for anybody, like, I forgive them, I see you for who you are. I will still love you unconditionally even if I never see you again, and I truly, deeply wish them the best, and I hope that they're loved and feel loved, and I hope that they have peace.
I don't think I'm surprised I haven't ever recommended this book to you. It's called Radical Forgiveness. I don't remember,
I don't remember you ever saying that.
but it's basically saying like we don't there's nothing to forgive because we came into this world agreeing to experience whatever we experience. It's an interesting concept. I don't know how much I buy into it, but it was very helpful in learning to forgive people.
You have to put that on the list, on this
Yes, I
episode's list.
definitely will. Definitely will. Um, I think is there anything we didn't say that you can think of?
No, I hope everybody
No?
keeps loving and evolving, and thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you supporting us and listening to us, and we'd love to hear
Yeah,
your
thank
perspectives
you.
on anything.
Yeah, share your awakening stories and, maybe we have you on the podcast to share them as well. Please, if you haven't already, follow and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're on YouTube as well.
Full video episodes. Thank you all for joining us this week, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Namaste.
Namaste.